You need to leave, Chris, the restaurant owner, said firmly, his glare cold, his crisp blazer catching the light as though it carried his arrogance. Daniel froze, the fork in his hand hovering. Excuse me, we just got served. His voice was calm but edged with disbelief. Chris's glare hardened, his jaw tight. You shouldn't have been seated in the first place. Felicia blinked in shock, her fingers tightening around the napkin in her lap. We made a reservation, she said firmly, pulling her phone from her purse with steady hands. She tapped the screen and held it up, revealing the email confirmation. Chris let out a short, dismissive laugh. Impossible. We're fully booked tonight. There's no way you got in legitimately. But here it is, Felicia insisted, the glow of the phone lighting up her determined face. Chris leaned closer, his smirk sharp. I don't care. I need this space. You're dragging things out. Daniel sat taller, his tone unwavering. We aren't dragging things out. We just got our meals. Chris snapped, his voice slicing through the room. I don't care. That table is reserved for a VIP. Daniel's calm exterior didn't break. We're not leaving. We paid to eat here. Chris stormed away, muttering under his breath, his polished shoes clapping angrily against the floor. The air around him seemed to bristle with irritation as he approached a young waitress. He leaned down, his words sharp and cutting. Why did you serve them? The waitress, her eyes wide with nervousness, fidgeted with her notepad. They had a confirmed reservation, sir. Chris's jaw worked furiously. I don't want them here, especially not tonight. Why tonight? She asked softly, almost trembling. Chris bent closer, whispering, his voice dripping with paranoia. The restaurant's up for sale. A buyer is coming tonight. What impression do you think it gives if he walks in and sees them front and center? The waitress swallowed, nodding reluctantly, her conscience warring with her orders. Later, she approached Daniel and Felicia, forcing a small, apologetic smile. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, she said gently. Would you mind moving to a quieter table? Somewhere more private? Daniel frowned, his brow furrowing. Why? We're fine right here. His voice was steady but laced with suspicion. It would offer more privacy, she said again, her tone almost pleading. Daniel leaned back in his chair, unimpressed, his eyes narrowing as though he could see right through the excuse. Felicia reached across the table, resting her hand softly on his. Let's just go, she whispered. I don't want the night ruined. Daniel exhaled slowly, his jaw tense. He didn't like it. All right, he muttered, but I don't like this. The waitress gathered their plates, her steps hesitant as she carried them back to Chris. They agreed to move, she said quietly. Chris grinned smugly, the corners of his mouth twisting into victory. Good. I'll take it from here. He snatched their bill and strutted back toward the couple, slapping the check down on the table. Here's your bill. Daniel's head snapped up. What? What? We haven't even finished eating. Are you trying to scam us? Chris's voice was flat, almost bored. I just want to make sure you pay before anything else. Daniel's chest tightened. Why are we being singled out? Chris crossed his arms, his tone laced with venom. Because I've seen plenty of people like you walk out without paying. Felicia's eyes burned as she pointed toward a white couple nearby, enjoying their meal undisturbed. They didn't have to pay up front. We're being treated differently. Daniel's voice dropped low, his anger simmering. This isn't different treatment. This is intimidation. Chris ignored him, leaning in, his patience snapping. Are you paying or not? Felicia sighed, her voice weary. Just pay, Daniel. We would have paid eventually anyway. Reluctantly, Daniel pulled out his card. Chris snatched it, swiped with a flourish, and shoved it back. The waitress will show you to your private room, he said smugly. The waitress, her face pale, guided them down a narrow hallway. The lighting dimmed as they walked, the laughter of the dining room fading behind them. She stopped at a worn door and pushed it open. Daniel stepped in, his eyes scanning the room. His face hardened. What is this? It wasn't a private room. It was a dusty storage space, boxes stacked against the walls, the smell of bleach faint in the air. This is where the manager wants you seated, the waitress said, her voice trembling with shame. Felicia's voice cut through the tension, sharp and fierce. This is unacceptable. We're not sitting in here. The waitress's eyes shimmered. I'm sorry, my hands are tied. Felicia's voice rose, steady with indignation. Get him. We want to speak to him, now. Back in the lounge, Chris was in his element, his voice smooth as he charmed the potential buyer. His laugh was polished, his gestures large, every move calculated to impress. When the waitress gave him the signal, he sighed with irritation. He excused himself smoothly. Apologies, I'll be right back. Some customers are causing trouble. His shoes struck the hallway floor like hammers as he stormed toward Daniel and Felicia. His voice was venomous, exploding in the narrow space. You people always think you're owed special treatment. Leave. Now. But just as his fury reached its peak, footsteps echoed behind him. The buyer had followed. Curiosity piqued. He stepped into view just as Chris turned to plaster on his salesman's smile. Before Chris could spin his lies, the buyer extended his hand. Not to Chris, but to Daniel. He said to Chris, "This is the general manager I told you about." Chris froze, his face draining of color. Daniel's calm gaze met the buyer's, and Felicia spoke, her voice carrying both pain and strength. She recounted everything Chris had done that night, each humiliation laid bare. Chris stammered, desperate. "If you sign the papers, this restaurant will be yours. I'll be gone." His words tumbled out frantic, a man watching his empire crumble. The buyer turned to Daniel. "What do you think?" Daniel leaned back slightly, his calm unshaken. A smirk tugged at his lips. "I don't think anyone should be doing business with someone like that. Walk away. Let him sink." Chris's smile collapsed, his shoulders slumping as the weight of his downfall pressed down. His arrogance, his prejudice, everything he had built his pride on, it all shattered in that moment. And as the buyer nodded at Daniel, turning his back on Chris without hesitation, the lesson was clear. Arrogance and hatred always carry a price, and sometimes that price is everything you thought you controlled. Because the person you try to push aside might be the very one holding your future in their hands. If stories like this move you, then don't just scroll away. Tap that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We want to see how far these voices travel.